People always ask me, Harshada, how can you have a degree in mental health counseling and still read tarot cards? Are they not the opposites and don't they cancel out each other? And honestly, I used to struggle to answer that question and I used to struggle to sit in between both of these worlds. But let's be honest, the wellness world and the science world both have a problem with someone like me. A counselor who reads tarot cards and a tarot reader who's a certified mental health counselor. Well, I exist in a space that neither sides quite trust. But here is what I have come to understand and what I'm going to show you through this entire video. They are not opposites. They are two different maps serving the same purpose. And that leads me to this question. All spiritual gurus and all spiritual knowledge tell you that ignorance is the root cause of all suffering. If that is true, what is it that we're actually ignorant of? Stay with me till the end of this video because I'll answer this question and I'll show you how both psychology and tarot are actually serving the same purpose. You have probably heard spiritual teachers say something like this: ignorance is what keeps us in suffering. But what they're talking about when they say ignorance is not lack of information or education, obviously. They're talking about something much more specific: a lack of self awareness. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, for one who has conquered the mind is best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, the mind will remain the greatest enemy. The Buddha said something very similar. Your worst enemy cannot do as much harm as your own unguarded thoughts. And Rumi wrote, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. Three different traditions, different centuries, but one consistent message. The root of suffering is not outside of you, it is not understanding your own mind. And this is exactly where psychology becomes so powerful. Because psychology is the science of understanding the mind, how we think, how our emotions work, and why we repeat certain patterns even when we know better. So when spiritual traditions talk about overcoming ignorance, what they're really pointing towards is something deeply practical: self-awareness, meaning understanding your own mind, understanding your own emotions, and understanding the unconscious patterns that drive your life even without your permission. And this is where counseling and tarot begin to overlap in ways that sometimes even I am surprised. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works from my own life. In my early 20s, I really struggled a lot with anger. Through therapy, I learned that anger often comes from what psychologists call should statements. These are rigid expectations of our mind that tells us how people should be, how people should behave, and what the situation should look like. When these expectations aren't met, frustration and anger arise. This was genuinely a useful insight to me. It gave me a mechanism, it helped me see my patterns, and I knew exactly what needed to be changed. But understanding something doesn't always help you change it. Around the same time, I read a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk, that spoke about anger in a completely different way. Instead of trying to suppress it or immediately trying to fix it, he suggested something much simpler. He said, sit with your anger, talk to it, listen to what it's trying to tell you. That is when in my meditation I invited my anger and I started to have a conversation with it. I asked my anger, what is it that you're trying to tell me? And this changed everything for me. So instead of trying to correct it with all of my psychology tools that I had learned in therapy, I also in my meditation and with this as an example learned to sit with it, observe it, and understand what it was actually asking for. This combination is finally what helped me resolve my patterns. Not only manage them, but help me actually resolve my anger issues. And this brings me to one more tool that bridges both of these things together, which is tarot. I grew up surrounded by spirituality and I pursued a rigorous degree in mental health. And because of this combination, I see tarot very differently than how it is often perceived or portrayed or practiced. Tarot, when used responsibly, sits at the exact intersection of psychology and spirituality. Psychologically, tarot works like a mirror. The imagery and the symbols of the cards help bring unconscious thoughts like fears, desires into awareness. When someone looks at the cards and we start discussing what it might represent in their life, it almost always reveals patterns that they were already feeling but perhaps couldn't quite articulate. In that way, tarot functions very similarly to psychological tools because it helps people reflect, notice, and gain clarity about their own inner world. But tarot is also spiritual because once that awareness is there, the cards invite you to take a step back and look at yourself from a bigger perspective and to ask questions about purpose, timing, growth, and meaning. A lot like what I shared about anger, when you invite anger to come and sit with you. Similarly, when doing tarot, you invite all of these things to come sit with you and allows for you to ask questions. It doesn't replace therapy, and tarot doesn't replace practical decision making, but it helps people see that their situation through a much deeper lens, one that includes both self awareness and meaning. Tarot doesn't tell you what is going to happen, it helps you understand what is already happening inside of you. And I want to show you exactly what that looks like in practice. A client once came to me feeling extremely stuck in her career. She kept saying, I feel like I'm failing, everyone else seems to be moving up the career ladder, whereas I am falling behind. This feeling of falling behind, of somehow being wrong or broken or having an imposter syndrome, is the most common thing I've seen in both my counseling sessions as well as in my tarot readings. When we looked at the cards, one of the central cards to her reading was a Seven of Pentacles. In the tarot symbolism, this card often represents a period of waiting, reassessment, and long-term growth. It's the farmer who planted a seed a long time ago and now stands back, evaluating whether the harvest will be what he hoped for. So we took this conversation from being, there's something wrong with me, to me asking her, what is it that you hoped for with all the effort that you've put in? And so we began talking about how instead of her comparing herself to others, we started to change that conversation to talking more about her future. Instead of seeing this phase as a failure, this card suggested something different. This was a pause for reflection, a moment to reevaluate whether the path that she was on was actually aligned with what she wanted. And that shift alone changed the entire tone of our session. And she went from something is wrong with me to what am I actually building. And then to that, I was able to attach a lot of other therapy tools that help her focus more on the future and plan for a better future. That's what happens when you combine the reflective power of tarot with the practical grounding of psychological tools. Now, with that in mind, let me come to the question I asked you at the very beginning of my video. Remember the question I asked you? If ignorance is the root of all suffering, what exactly are we supposed to be ignorant of? Here's the answer. We are ignorant of ourselves, our patterns, our unconscious beliefs, the stories we are running on autopilot in our own mind, the emotions we've learned to suppress or to avoid, the parts of ourselves that we are still waiting to be seen or understood. This is the ignorance that every spiritual tradition is pointing to. And that is exactly what psychology, tarot, and good counseling all works to dissolve. Each in their own way, of course, but towards the same destination. So to recap, 3 things I hope you're taking away from this conversation. First, tarot and therapy are simply 2 different maps to understanding the same human experience. Neither is the whole picture on its own. Second, tarot is uniquely powerful at helping each of us surface unconscious fears and patterns, the things we feel but can't always articulate. Third, once these patterns are visible, that is where clinical tools become essential because they give us the practical pathway to actually working through and heal what we've uncovered. If you want to see how exactly I use tarot to uncover subconscious blocks in real time, then make sure to book a session with me. I will see you in the next video. Until then, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel.